Endurance Junkie Podcast, Episode 4. Hey there, Junkie, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest, and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. Alright, let's get started. Today's guest is none other than world-class run coach and all-around nice guy, Bobby McGee. Bobby has coached athletes who have produced world records, won world championships, and have been consistently ranked amongst the best in their events. He coaches both runners and triathletes, and has worked with USA Triathlon preparing athletes for ITU World Cup races and the Olympic Games. Alright, Bobby, thanks for taking the time to chat here today. Maybe can you start by telling us a bit about yourself, your own sporting background, and how you got into coaching?
Yeah, I grew up in South Africa, so I pretty much did the same thing that most young South African kids during the 60s and the 70s and even the 80s would do. I played cricket, I played rugby, I played field hockey, a bit of swimming, and mostly for me, cross-country running and track running. So that was my background at school. When I went to university, I played a bit of soccer, and also did some league cross-country running in one of the lower level league teams of my university. But the highest level of sport that I achieved as an actual player was in field hockey. I was a field hockey goalkeeper, and I reached the equivalent of the minors. I sort of played in the South African Country Districts tournament for Southwestern Districts, which is a smaller province in South Africa, and then I also played for Combined Forces, which was the Defence Force team, the military team. But pretty much my background in terms of study and so on has always been in terms of coaching. So I was always going to be a coach from a professional standpoint. But in the apartheid years, of course, that was not possible. Sport was all amateur at that stage. There was no money involved in either field hockey or running or any of those other sports. So I became a school teacher, and as a school teacher, I basically took the theoretical knowledge that I had from my studying in human movement studies and my post-grad work in human movement studies. And I practically got to apply it with high school cross-country runners and high school track middle distance runners. And then I started coaching university teams. And then in about 1992, when apartheid ended, I came over to the US, mostly for the spring and the fall marathon. So I'd come across for about 3 months, work with some runners, South African runners that were going to take part in either Boston or Chicago or in London or in New York. And that carried on working. I was here more and more until I started coaching American distance runners as well. And then by 2002, I was approached by USA Triathlon to start working with triathletes. And that's when I started working more on the side of triathlon than even on the side of distance running, but in triathlon as a distance running expert and as a sports psychology expert as well.
Yeah. So it was only after the apartheid was ended that you were able to travel abroad and get in contact with international sporting competitions and international athletes.
Correct. I was lucky in as much that as early as 86, I was already traveling abroad to speak to coaches, and they were quite willing to speak to me actually because I represented no threat. I had no athletes that could compete against their athletes. So I was just an interested party. So, even before the end of apartheid, I had the opportunity to speak to coaches. There were some countries that did not want to speak to me, some individuals from some countries. I think the top coaches at that time in Scotland didn't want to talk to me, and the Italians as well, interestingly enough, did not want to talk to me. But once 92 came along, I was the South African coach to the 92 Olympics for the marathon team. And then, of course, we got to travel and coach and start to share with the international community.
Oh, cool. And now you work with a bunch of triathletes as well. You did Ironman as well, if I'm correct?
Yeah, I did basically long distance racing in the early days. So I think I did my long distance races in '86, but it was the Nice distances. You
Yeah,
know,
three-quarter
the
distances. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So those are the distances that we did.
Okay, and you did those in South Africa at the time.
Correct. Yeah, I've only raced one triathlon on two occasions in the US, and that was the Boulder Peak Triathlon.
Yeah. And the athletes that you coach today, the triathletes that you coach today, do you help these on with all three sports, or do you just focus on their running technique?
Well, I work for USA Triathlon, and so I am a performance advisor with USA Triathlon. And so the work that I do there is primarily with helping with run technique, with run training methodologies specific to triathlon, and with sports psychology. So, I have a little bit of involvement with the swim and with the bike in terms of, playing a supporting role there. But I'm definitely am not the creator and the driver of that training. We really support a system where we have an overall coach who drives all three disciplines and then brings in experts to support them with each individual discipline. So that's how that goes. And so I'm not really, in fact, in my own business, I don't coach triathletes at all. I only coach runners, and then I'll do, one-off sessions with triathletes, helping them with their run mechanics or talking to them about their run training. But I don't coach triathletes at all.
Oh, okay. All right, let's get into a bit more detail now that we have a bit of an idea of where you come from. There are basically two things that I'd like to talk to you about today. First of all, your run walk protocol for
Hmm.
marathon and Ironman running, for example, and then your run transformation course that you offer on your website. Uh, let's maybe start with the run walk protocol. Can you explain a bit what it is and how people can implement it in their training and racing?
Absolutely. The father of the run walk protocol is an Olympic runner by the name of Jeff Galloway, who has an extensive marathon coaching business where he coaches people to run marathons with the run walk method. So it's not unique to me. I would say I'm a modern day crusader for that, and it basically comes down to, firstly, the concept is instead of running the whole way. When I started off in Boulder, there were certain clubs in town that had training programs, and one of their training programs was run 10K the whole way. And I went to the owner of the club and I said to him, "Why do you have that program?" And it's from an emotional standpoint, a beginner runner is often all about, well, I at least want to be able to run the whole way. And then I added to that and said, so you want to run a marathon off the bike the whole way, or you want to run a marathon and you don't want to stop running, but it's going to take you 6 hours. But if you take a walk run method and you go 450, what are people going to ask you afterwards? Are they going to ask you if you ran the whole way, or are they going to ask you what your time was? And what do you want to tell them? 6 hours, or do you want to tell them 450? So that's basically where it started. But when you started looking at the anecdotal evidence, and we're looking to do some research on this, but when you look at the anecdotal evidence, there's so many reasons why it makes sense. So running is such a difficult activity that for the pure beginner, a concerted
Oh, I lost you there for a second.
All right. Yes. So I started looking at the anecdotal evidence that was proving that why this would work, and I found that people were able to pace themselves better. And we were talking about beginners, and with a beginner, doing a 6 week walking program before they even start running, especially with me here at altitude, for an individual that's never run before to be effective and keep that heart rate of theirs under 65% of their heart rate reserve, there's not a lot of people that can actually run at that lower heart rate. It takes a definite shift or two in cardiac ability to be able to actually run at those slower paces. And so a lot of people end up never running at the right pace. They end up just working too hard and they never get the experience of developing endurance or learning how to fat burn or any of those. And so if a beginner runner starts with walking and then introduces running, in a 1 minute running, 1 minute walking protocol, their transition is much smoother. There are far fewer injuries. Their recovery rates are much higher. And most importantly, their ability to stay in the sport is greatly impacted. They find that it's much less confronting, and they're able to go through that tough 6 to 8 week period in the beginning where they're trying to build some consistency and they're trying to stay safe and not get a stress fracture, not get injured. So it works really well there. Then, if you look at simple things like cardiac drift, the tendency for the heart rate to get higher and higher as a long run progresses or as a workout progresses. If you use the walk-run method, obviously, whatever your interval is, whether that's 6 minutes of running and 1 minute of walking, or 9 minutes of running, 1 minute of walking, that every time you do that walk break, that heart rate comes down, and when you start the next run session, the heart rate starts climbing again from a much lower level. So your overall heart rate for the session is much lower, and your cardiac drift is greatly limited. Also, lower leg injuries that come from consistent pressure and poor vascularity and inability of the body to sufficiently clear blood back up through proper contraction through the legs is greatly enhanced by using a walk-run method. So, all of those are advantages too. But I think most people that listen in to something like this podcast will say, well, look, I'm an experienced athlete and I've been running for 5 or 10 or 15 years, whatever the case might be. How can it be useful to me? And surely from a mathematical standpoint, if I'm walking for 1 minute for every 9 minutes that I'm running, I'm going to be able to run much faster if I run the whole way. But if you take it one step further and you realize you only have to run for a short period of time, that period of time that you're running considerably faster, and you're also running with a mindset that you only have to run this finite amount of time before you take a break. And when you do take that break, you can set yourself to run fast again for the next one. So not only is pacing impacted, but generally in the longer distances that are, in excess of an hour and a half, 2 hours, you are going to be able to maintain your pace much more, and you're going to be able to run segments overall a lot faster. So, I think when you're explaining to a dyed-in-the-wool old school runner why the walk-run method works, it's basically taking interval training for the average runner and you teaching them how to develop their endurance through intervals, just like a power, what was the great Czech runner's name?
Zatopek?
Zatopek, yeah, same kind of thing, the 400s and, each one a little slower than the previous one. But the thing with the walk-run method is it allows people to complete these extended workouts that they require for running a half marathon or doing a half Ironman or doing an Ironman, but without detraining afterwards. So, even with the elites, when I'm using a walk-run methodology, they can do more mileage. They recover so much quicker, so they can do more quality workouts. The benefits are endless, and if you add to the walk-run method that, the average marathon runner probably doesn't need a long run per week, but they probably would do better if they did a long run every 2 weeks and did a very long hike every other week. In that way, they're using that walk-run approach to endurance much, much more effectively.
Yeah, because probably they will need less time to recover from that long run when they actually do go long.
Exactly. And the other point there is you can grow your mileage so much quicker, So if your longest run is an hour, if you go and do your next long run at 75 minutes, that's a pretty large chunk of change to be running for an extra 15 minutes. Yeah. But we find with the walk-run method, you can increase your mileage by, in excess of 15% per week, where you can just move that mileage up much quicker because, you're basically doing, a hike involved with a long run, and you're not so tied into time, and you're getting that time on your legs without the negative effects of continuous running.
I guess the only thing that you have to overcome then is your own ego, and because I think it's it's cool to say I didn't walk during my my Ironman marathon, but like you said, if you have to choose between a 450 doing the run walk method and a 6 hour when you're running all the time, run walk definitely makes sense. Now, is this something that you should use in every run session that you do, or is it just limited to your longer runs?
It depends. So in other words, a beginner would do it every session.
Hmm.
Every run that they do, they would do walk run. And then as you are progressing to the longer distances, let's say it's real comfortable for you to run 45 minutes continuously, then you run 45 minutes continuously. But if you want to progress that to an hour run, then you might do something like 4 by 15 minutes, and be able to bump that up to an hour.
Okay.
But I do find with the triathletes especially, I use it quite a lot of the time. It's almost like for the first half of the base training period, I'll break up their runs anything from 70 minutes and longer into a walk run scenario. But for a pure runner, probably, somewhere other side of 75 to 90 minutes, it's a good idea to start using the walk run methodology. And if you're going to race with the walk run methodology, obviously you have to train that way as well, because you can get cramps and so on from the walking if you're not used to walking for extended periods of time as well.
Yeah. Because I guess a lot of people are already using the run walk method during Ironman races without actually knowing it, because they probably stop at the aid stations to have a drink and to eat something.
Exactly.
But
The problem with that is that if they don't do it proactively, in other words, they run the first, 15 or 20 kilometers non-stop, and they run through the aid stations and they drink, and then they forced into a walk run method and they start using the aid stations, the damage is already done. So
yeah,
the greatest value with a walk run is that it's a proactive from the start. I've had the greatest results when I actually get people to start at the very beginning of the run. The very first thing that they do is walk. They walk out of transition
okay.
and then establish that pattern.
Yeah. All right, cool. So one of the advantages of the run walk protocol is, you recover more quickly from these long sessions, and that will help you reduce your injuries as well. But more important than recovery is proper run technique. Can you define good running form and talk a bit about the different types of foot strike and how that can have an impact on technique?
Of course, of course. There are many other benefits also. You mentioned with a walk run. The two other ones I think that are critical for triathletes before we move on to the technique is the concept of heat mitigation. It's so much easier to deal with extreme climactic conditions when you're doing the walk run methodology. And then the other one is it's so much easier to ingest the right amount of fluids and the right amount of calories if you are, doing a little section of walking, with a lower heart rate. The gut is with less mechanical stress on the gut as well. So I just wanted to throw those in there.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So when it comes to mechanics, I think the most important thing for a triathlete is to understand that running mechanics is there's a very different approach to altering somebody's running mechanics than there is to saying altering somebody's swim mechanics or even altering somebody's pedal mechanics. You can learn to be able to increase your revs on the bike. That's a neuromuscular process. And similarly in the pool, you can increase your range of motion. You can do a whole lot of things, and then you can go through some drills and you can change your swimming form. You can become, a bilateral breather or something like that. Whereas in running, it's a much more primal, inherent capability. And so my job as a biomechanist in running is one of removing issues that prevent an individual from being able to run like they could run when they were, say, 14 to 16 years old, without any injuries, without protracted periods of time sitting down, without muscle imbalances, without losses of strength, without increases in mass that are non-propulsive or non-contributing towards endurance. So I'm looking at things at an individual, and I'm saying to that individual, we want to reduce extraneous movements. So I want that runner to be much more compact. And if there are movements that are extraneous, that are moving the runner either outside of this linear pathway that they want to run in, and introducing lateral forces or upward forces or excessive downward forces, I want to find out how to address those. And my 3 steps are, range of motion. Can they not get into the position to get the most out of their physiology and out of their endurance? And the second one is are they not powerful enough, not necessarily strong enough, are they not powerful enough to maintain posture so that that basketball is fully inflated and can bounce? So in other words, what's stopping them from getting as much out of their plantar fascia, their Achilles tendon, their knee stiffness, and their hip stability as possible? So range of motion first, and then power second. And then the third thing is what movement patterns have been blanketed as a result of those things? What movement skills do they need to relearn? It's very difficult to teach them movement skills that they've never learned before. And one of those is obviously that whole midfoot elastic springy approach. Some athletes just don't have the joint integrity and the joint mobility to be able to utilize their fascia as an elite runner or a very accomplished runner would do. So the first thing I'm looking at is compact. Are those arms high enough for that kinetic chain of the short lever of having the arm action be no lower than the elbow length? All right. Are their arms suitably close to their sides in a relaxed fashion? Are they not adding to raising their center of mass? The second thing that I work on is being connected. In other words, because of muscle weakness or because of a lack of dynamic balance, are they insecure, and are they therefore disconnecting their chest from their pelvis? And if they're disconnecting their chest, they're disconnecting their arms. So are they running peripherally? In other words, either holding their upper body still or in such a position that they cannot gain that dynamic balance and are also unable to run from higher up in their core by utilizing full hip extension. So those are the first two things that I'm working on. So compact and connected. So I really want the chest nice and squarely on the pelvis. And that means I need to get their back stronger. I need to get their core generally stronger, and I need to improve their balance for them to be comfortable enough at whatever pace they're running at to maintain that body position, that posture. And then the third one is cadence. So from Ironman, from the pros, the Ironman distance, especially the women, most of them are able to get away with a reasonably short stride length. So they're very compact, they're very economical. All right. And, most of these top Ironman runners in the pro ranks with a woman, have cadences in excess of 100 steps a minute with 1 foot. All right. Obviously, if they need to go considerably faster than 7 minutes a mile, like the Gwen Jorgensens of the world, and they need to run, close to 3 minutes 10, 3 minutes 15, 3 minutes 20 per kilometer, then they're going to need some stride length, and that requires some exceptional power, and they need more than just stride rates. So the Ironman gals have these shorter, quick steps, whereas a lot of the elite ITU draft legal runners that are running, times faster than 35 and a half or 36 minutes, they are using some stride length as well. So they're much more powerful individuals. And Mirinda Carfrae is an example of that type of run. And with the men, you notice that there's some guys that can run with high cadence. They're pretty successful, especially if they're good swim bikers. They can run like a 253 off the bike with a high cadence. But if they do want to get down into the 240s, they're going to have some sort of stride length and some sort of a power component to their running, because they're running, closer to that 4 minutes a K type of pace.
Yeah, awesome. Now, everything you just talked about, can people find that on your Run Transformation course on your website?
Absolutely. On my website, I have that Run Transformation course that is, 10 hours long, and it's divided into 3 main parts. And those 3 main parts are the running mechanics and the drills associated with these various issues that I've just spoken about, and with a lot of video to support that. And then there's also a section on run training, how to get the best out of your physiology and how to approach that depending on the distance that you're training for. And then there's a extensive section on sports psychology as well, the psychology of endurance. And another component there to the running mechanics is what I call running sports essentials. looking at the range of motion exercises, looking at the active release work that you need to do, looking at the muscle activation, looking at how you facilitate and recruit for effective running movement, as well as the drills associated with the various issues that the athlete has.
Yeah. All right. I'll definitely make sure to put the necessary links in the show notes so that people can find that course on your website.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we only have a couple of minutes left here before wrapping up the show, and I usually end with a quick round of short questions. When's the best moment to do run drills? During your warm up or your cool down?
It's a very good question, but with my background in neuromuscular facilitation and in perceptual motor aspects, it's a law in biomechanics almost. It's a given principle that if you want to learn quickly and effectively, you have to learn when you are fresh. So the best time to do drills is after a light warm up before you do a session. There is something to be said for especially a triathlete that tends to have, although the research shows that we get access to our form that we've lost on the bike after, a little bit of running, 2 or 3 kilometers of running, then the form comes back to you in some cases. So there is a little bit of something to be said for certain drills that you do after riding your bike or certain drills that you do after swimming, just to restore your running function more effectively. Yeah. But as a general rule of thumb, if you want to get the most out of your drills, you want to do those as fresh as possible. So frequency is more important when it comes to skill learning, whereas, continuation, volume is more important when it comes to fitness. But if you want to improve your running skills, you have to do your drills frequently, and you have to run more frequently than running for, longer periods of time, because then you start to lose access to that pattern.
Yeah, cool. What are the 3 most essential run drills that you teach your runners?
I find run drills are so specific to the individual. So it all depends on what that individual is doing, especially as pertaining to foot strike. So there's certain drills that a midfoot striker should use, and there's certain drills that a heel striker should use. So I'd say essential drills for a heel striker would probably be heel walks. So you're just walking along with your toes off the ground. And then probably also some form of hip mobility, but just making sure that hip is stable, so something like leg swings or something like that. And then also for the triathlete that spends so much time sitting in a compromised position on the saddle, I would say something like some form of hamstring kickouts if that athlete is healthy. For the midfoot striker, especially with the concentric motion of the bike and the swim, I would say probably drills like quick feet, is an important drill. Mm-hmm. And then I think the whole community could probably benefit from some sort of a knee hug exercise where they're doing a marching drill and pulling their knee to their chest and just loosening up that posterior chain a little bit. I think that would also be a key drill for them to look at.
Yeah. What's your view on gym work for runners?
I think for high level runners, it's absolutely essential that they work on that, because although running is quite an all-encompassing activity, it still creates asymmetric development. So runners tend to get tight quads. They need their quads a lot. They can tend to have their VMOs shut down. They can tend to get quite fatigued hamstrings if their quads are tight. So I really do believe that some sort of power work and also muscle endurance work specifically in the gym is a good idea. I don't do any calf work, but I'm a real big fan of things like single-legged squats, even just regular squats. I think are a really good idea. And then any of the back extension activities that are appropriate for the age and the ability level of the athlete, like Superman drills and so on. Mm-hmm. I like, dead bugs on BOSU balls. I like blocking activities, for the groin and for the hip flexors. I think all of those are important activities. And I think that many an age group runner, amateur runner could probably stand to lose, 5 or 10% of their run volume and use that time in the gym effectively.
Yeah. What's your view on training for a spring marathon when your real A race is an Ironman in summer?
I'm probably, as a blanket opinion, I'm probably not a fan. I just think that not necessarily the training for that marathon, but the running of that marathon itself introduces risks to the Ironman athlete that might not be worth it. What can be gained in running in a marathon and running the risk of running too fast in the beginning, not getting the pacing right, uh, losing a lot of downtime. I think that if you run a reasonably effective marathon, you're probably going to need about 5 weeks to recover from that. So as a general rule of thumb, I would say no, it's not a good idea. If this person is very lightweight, is a very skilled endurance athlete, enjoys running the marathon, and can, hold back and not run a 100% marathon, I think it's worthwhile. But otherwise, and generally not. Males under 35 years old will not find it possible to go slowly enough and comfortably enough in a marathon to not require months and months of recovery.
So train for it, just don't race it.
Exactly right.
All right, and the final one I have for today: should an athlete run by time or by distance?
Oh, absolutely for time. Absolutely for time. I think when it comes down to a regular marathon runner who is at the early stages of their career, and they just need some confidence to know they'll be able to cover the distance. Sure, they need some 30-35 kilometer runs in there, but as a general rule of thumb, nope. Just run for hours. It's so much easier to plan the training, so much easier to get a handle on it, and it's also so much easier to move the runner away from some sort of weekly mileage goal that they're looking for.
All right. Well, thanks for those, Bobby. Much appreciated. Anything else you would like to plug or tell us how people can get in touch with you?
Sure. I have a number of books, and I have a video as well on the running mechanics that could help people. It has some drills and some. It's also a DVD-ROM, so there's some capability there for people to gain some information over and above the Run Transformation course. And then I also have a Running Sports Essentials ebook that gives people some insight into how to do dynamic warm-ups, how to do facilitation and activation activities, how to do those active release activities to get the quads and the calves and the pecs and so on nice and loose. So that's there as well. And then I have the oldest book that I have is my sports psychology book. It's called Magical Running. So those are all available on the website as well. And I think as a closing thought, the only real definitive research that shows what is a performance influencer without a doubt with any level of athlete, and that is consistency. And so if people can move away from their backgrounds in explosive sports when they come to endurance sports and realize that if they trained at 50% of their capacity for an extended period of time, 3 or 4 months, they would have better performances than if they trained closer to 85-90% of their capacity and kept breaking down every 3 or 4 weeks. So this is just a cry for find a way that you can train consistently over a period of time, and you'll find the benefits accrue greatly.
All right. Well, thanks again, Bobby, for taking the time to chat. It has been a pleasure. Maybe we can do this again soon and talk a bit more detail about other mechanics involved in running. Thanks very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.